Hey, home group leaders, hope you're doing well. It feels like it's been forever since I've seen many of you, but I've been hearing stories trickle down that many of you are doing well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Greg, and I serve here on staff now as the pastor of Group Life, which is why you're hearing from me rather than Pastor Craig, who maybe you've heard from in the past. And what I want to do today is walk us through a bit of a relaunch plan, orientation, maybe answer questions that some of you are wondering regarding relaunching your groups this fall. And so officially, I want to welcome you to Group Life Training 2020. Here's what's going to be helpful as we go through some content today. If there are questions that you still have for your groups at the end of this relaunch plan and training, you can definitely email me, get in contact with me, but probably the fastest and most direct way to get an answer is to get in touch with your mentor, which I know that many of you have been already doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to fly over bird's eye view of what Group Life relaunching home groups is going to look like this fall, and hopefully that will be helpful for you. All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the home group calendar this year. Some of you have been wondering when groups are going to be relaunching. The week of September 27 has been a soft communication launch of all of Group Life. So within Group Life here at Hope, we have men's and women's, 20s, seniors, home groups, and D groups. And all of that is part of my new job description to help care for you and lead you well as leaders within our church. But in particular regarding home groups, what we're encouraging our groups to think about is possibly relaunching their groups sometime along the lines of September 27. And so we're calling that our launch week-ish, because what we want to say is if your group needs an extra week to get ready, or because of school, you're still trying to get into routine, that's totally fine. But as we'll talk about in a few moments, there will be curriculum available for you and your group should you want to begin meeting the week of September 27. I know it sounds like a long time away, but the ministry year, if you know, normally wraps up sometime in June when the school years are wrapping up. So you can take note of that, and that's kind of what the ministry year expectation is going to look like. All right, so this fall, for someone who's looking to get involved in home groups, they have two options. Hopefully this visual is helpful for you. They're going to be someone who says, I want to do Group Life online, or they're going to be someone based on their comfort level who is going to say, I want to do Group Life in person. And we'll talk about those today as well. Now, let's take, for example, our scuba diver, Steve, who maybe is someone who says, I want to dive into Group Life this fall. What does that look like for them? Well, here's what's going to look like. Maybe Steve is someone who wants to get involved in an online group. And like many of our groups who have been continuing through this season, you've been meeting online. Perhaps if you want to get into an online group, what we're going to encourage you to do is collectively together say, find a day and a time that works for your group. It's certainly easy to be able to do that. And hopefully your group will be able to find some time to do that. So that's what Steve's going to do. He's going to join an online group, and they're going to find a time that works for them, and they're going to be off to the races, ready to go. And so that's the plan for online groups. At the end, what we're going to do is we're going to highlight some of the things that we are looking for you as an online group, should you choose to meet this way. Maybe Steve is someone who's looking to dive into Group Life this fall, and he's saying, actually, I would rather meet in person. What does that look like? Well, there are a few options for in-person this year within Group Life. For home groups in particular, because you are a home group, one of the options will be to meet in homes. And likewise to the online group, we are encouraging in-home groups to find a day and a time that works for your group, likely in the evening. Historically, that's been the case. And then your group will be off to the races and ready to begin meeting together this fall. I want you to note as well that this fall in Group Life, in-person gatherings might also take place at the church. And what we've been trying to do as a team as we get ready for relaunching is to make space available for those who want to be meeting in person and fellowship and studying the word in prayer and in gathering together. But if you notice there, beginning this fall, the at church in-person gatherings midweek are only going to be reserved for women's, men's, seniors, and 20s. Therefore, home groups and D groups will not be meeting in the church this year. And there were a couple left last year, and they are planning other arrangements this year, but that's just because of building usage and making sure it's clean, ready for weekends, and just some of the ministry changes this year. And so just take note there that if you're looking to meet in person and you want to be at the church, you're going to be looking to get involved in men's, women's, 20s, and seniors. But the home groups have the option to meet online or in homes. Some of you are wondering what our home group curriculum is going to be for the fall. We are going to be tracking with our pulpit curriculum, which is the book of 2 Timothy, and that will take us all the way up to Christmas. I want to highlight for you maybe some things that will be helpful. So as leaders, we want to make resources available for you, and our goal is to have your coaching video ready sometime around Sundays at noon or early afternoon, that you're going to be able to watch that as well. It's going to be in video format, and it'll include the questions that you're going to be able to prepare as you lead your groups throughout that week. It might be helpful also just to remember what maybe our member expectations are as your groups get ready to relaunch. And obviously we want to care for our group members by encouraging them to be attending regularly. That's helpful for just growth week to week. We have the expectation that our group members have been watching or have watched or attended the service on the weekend so that they're able to speak to the things that they're learning about. And potentially, if you're the type of leader who likes to get the questions to your groups rather than just keep them before you lead, I'm not sure how all of you like to operate in that way, but we just want to encourage our group members perhaps to be thinking through the questions so they come ready to talk about or ready to share about what God is teaching them regarding certain questions. All right, hopefully that's clear for home group curriculum. Let's go back now to talk a little bit about what the two different groups will look like. As I mentioned, Steve wants to get and dive into group life this fall. He has the option to meet online, or he has the option to meet in person. And if he wants to meet in person, because he's looking to get involved in a home group, meeting at the church will not be available for him. Let's start with maybe Steve again wanting to get involved with an online group. Well, let's start with this one because it's probably the easiest option. You're going to be placed in an online group, or if your group is choosing to meet as an online group, you just need to pick a time that works for your group members and you are ready to go. Here's some things that we want to talk about within this training that might be helpful for you if your group is thinking about meeting online this fall. Certainly, if that's what your group is leading towards, that is absolutely okay. In fact, that's what we would be excited about. If you know that your group is excited about that, then that's perfect. So here are a few things to encourage you or to get you thinking about an online group this year. We want to encourage your group to choose whatever online platform your group is going to choose. Some of your groups might have different comfort levels. Maybe because of your groups, you have subscriptions or access to certain platforms, whether it be Zoom or Google or Skype or anything else. If your group was small enough, or if it's possible, you might choose to do it all on FaceTime if you all had Apple products, but we want your group to choose a platform that works for them. Now, related to the second point there, I want to talk about time limits and breakouts and prayer time. Some of your leaders have been talking over the summer, and I think all of us have been trying to learn from this past spring and early summer in terms of what was working, what wasn't working. Certainly there was this Zoom effect that was out there in our culture where people were just getting tired of staring at a screen, much like I'm doing right now, because I would rather be doing this in person with you all. But let's start with that first point there, time limits. So on the free account for products like Zoom, your meeting was limited to 40 minutes. Maybe because of work or connections or subscriptions, that's not relevant for you because you have purchased, I believe, a $20 subscription per month and you're able to have endless home group meetings. That would be wonderful for your group. Carry on, ignore this point. For those of you who might be wanting to meet on Zoom and have limited time in your meetings, a couple of different options that we want to encourage you. First of all, if you're going to be an online group that meets on Zoom, because your meeting is limited to 40 minutes, maybe you want to set up a part 1 and a part 2. Or maybe you call the first one discussion time and perhaps you call the second meeting together prayer time. Maybe as you structure your groups as well, as it says there, you want to think about how you might be able to use breakouts this year as your group relaunches. Maybe you have a time of discussion, and then when you do a breakout group later on, all the men go to one breakout room and the women go to one breakout room because that's how you naturally would do your prayer times. We want to leave that with you, but just let you know that there are some things to think about in terms of maybe how you want to structure your meetings, because maybe you've been in that meeting before and you see the time clicking down and someone's speaking and they are sharing something that's so wonderful, or that they've been really learning, or they're about to ask this really huge question, and all of a sudden your screen shuts off because your time ran out. Just want to challenge you to think proactively about how you might want to do it on products like Zoom, where you have a time limit. Screen sizes and viewing group members. One of our goals in the future, because we recognize that there's going to be a portion of online ministry that's going to be true and with us, I think, for a number of months or even this ministry year, if we want to view it in that context, is to have the goal to say, we would love to get to the point where we have enough leaders for online ministry where we could limit our online groups to groups of about 12. The reason why we have this goal is because maybe, as you have noticed in online meetings, you're only available to view about 12 people at a time on your screen, or maybe depending on the size of your screen, it might be upwards of 20 people. But we've heard from many of you over the spring and the early summer that this has maybe been a challenge for your group. You have to click back and forth between windows so you can see everyone. And so while we do have a goal of limiting online groups in the future, if your group does decide to meet online, there's a couple ways that you can solve this. One, have one screen with a couple. If you have couples in your group, you just have one screen and you get to see both of them. If you can afford it and you want to kind of limit number of screens per person, especially for breakout rooms where everyone needs a screen if they're going to be in their own room, and your group members sit in different places in their homes, that's up to you. But we just want you to know that we do have a goal in the future, but in the meantime, depending on the size of your screen, we know that that is one of the challenges in online groups, that you can't see everyone always at one time. If you have access to a tablet or even a computer, it's often better for online meetings because you can fit more people on a screen. And so if you're looking to have an online group member over Zoom, for example, and they're trying to participate only on their phone, it might be a little bit more challenging for them because of their screen size. But you probably have learned this. And a little tool that you can use in most of these platforms, they have different names for them. I know in Zoom it's called gallery mode or gallery view, and that allows you to see this grid, and I think Google Hangouts has that as well. But just know that we're mindful of that, but there's not really much we can do other than to say try and get the biggest screen you can, or work with your group so that they're able to find all these functions, be it gallery mode or whatever. Next thing it says there is tips for leading online groups. One of the things I would encourage you to do if you're going to be a leader of an online group this season and your group looks to meet in that way is to call to attention or invite the group member who has been hiding in your online group. What that might look like then is noticing that maybe someone hasn't been speaking yet, or noticing that someone normally who contributes hasn't contribute in the same way, or if you as a leader know that they struggle with connecting in your online group, I would just encourage you that as you lead your groups this year, just call them out to answer certain questions. Hey, Fran, I wonder if maybe you could read or answer this next question. as a group together. Or, hey, Joe, would you mind reading this verse as a group? And so rather than waiting for people to respond and maybe the awkwardness of everyone speaking over each other because of the internet delay, just want to encourage you just to call to attention group members to help engage them and help people feel like they are interacting with their group. The last point there, be gracious and look for those who are struggling. Companies like Zoom and Google have endless amounts of articles and videos that you can watch. And perhaps if you have a group member who is struggling with their group online this season, maybe there's a way as a leader that you can put them in touch. Text them, email them, some videos or articles that might be helpful for them of getting a little bit more comfortable with navigating their meetings with your group online. If your group is thriving in this way and it's not an issue, then certainly you don't have to worry about it. But we just wanted to let you know that there is all kinds of stuff out there that might be helpful for your group. All right, let's switch now to Steve, who's looking to dive into a group, and we've discussed the online tips and tricks and things to think about. Now let's move now to in-person. As I mentioned, at church meetings this year will not be available for home groups and D groups. It'll only be available for our more formal ministries there, like men's, women's, seniors, and 20s. And so let's talk a little bit about what in-person, in-home groups looks like this year. In order to do that, I want to share with you a couple passages of scripture, and they might be helpful for you. If you have a Bible, you can turn there as well. And so I'm going to flip in my Bible to the book of Hebrews. Over the last number of weeks, as we have been talking as a staff and a team and trying to brainstorm really conversations and ideas and answers to questions that no one has had to navigate before. There's been a few passages of scripture that I want to use maybe as a starter before we talk about in-home groups this year, and your group relaunching in this way. That might be something that could help encourage you or challenge you as a leader to look at the opportunity that God has placed before you to lead in this season. So Hebrews chapter 10 is a passage maybe that you've heard before, but in particular verses 24 and 25. I just want to read them for you and talk about this. So this is a verse that you've probably heard or maybe even memorized as a group, but it talks about how we should consider how to stir one another up into love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. As I mentioned, this is probably a verse that you've heard before. But look in the verse. It says, let us consider how to stir up one another towards love and good works. As we're thinking about how to stir one another up, our answer is, well, we know how. Let's have home groups. Let's meet together. But then look at the verse. The reason why we want to meet together is because it says, it's underlined there, we don't want to neglect to meet together. And so there seems to be a biblical command that we should be meeting together. But then the question is for us in this day and age, what does meeting together look like? Or what can it not look like in this season? And so together, as we get ready to relaunch, on the one end of the spectrum of launching home groups this year, we have this biblical command for us not to neglect to meet together. It's certainly true of the corporate church service that we have been striving towards and saying we need to be gathering together in person. And certainly our local government has allowed us to do that. And that is the grace of God that we're able to gather with 30% occupancy as of this moment and bring people into the building in a safe way to worship. In the same way, our desire in home groups is to not neglect to meet together. But now we're talking about how are we going to meet together with the purpose of stirring one and another up towards love and good works. So that's one end of the spectrum. But on the other end of the spectrum, if you have your Bible, I want you to turn to 1 Corinthians with me, because there are a number of verses there that Paul uses that maybe shape some of our thinking. And the first verse is from 1 Corinthians 8, verse 13, when Paul says, therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble. And so for me, kind of the context that I've been thinking about that is if we were to change the verse and perhaps it says something like this: therefore, if not wearing masks makes my brother stumble, I will wear a mask lest I make my brother stumble. Now, it's not quite the same context as what Paul's talking about in 1 Corinthians, but it's similar. And I think if we look for what is true in Paul's argument, our goal as leaders this season in group life and in home group ministry should be to say, how do we point our people to Jesus? Or maybe more importantly, what this verse isn't saying is, what do I need to remove from my life or my opinion or my conduct or my thought or my speech that would not deter the people in my groups from learning and growing in Christ? Here's another verse. Paul says a little bit later, 1 Corinthians 9, verse 12, about the right to eat or drink whenever he pleases under the new law. Paul says, nevertheless, we have not made use of this right, the right to eat or drink whenever and whatever he wants, but we endure anything rather than put an obstacle in the way of the gospel of Christ. That is the heart of the leader that says, I don't need to freely choose whatever rights I have, but I want to make sure that I can remove any obstacle from my group members this year in order to point them to Jesus Christ. So Paul continues later on, and just to summarize verses 19 through 23, Paul's essentially saying, in order to win the Jews, to win those under the law, to win those outside the law, to win the weak, Paul's essentially saying this: tell me what I need to do to point you to Jesus. So, loved ones, as a group leader this year, here's my counsel or my charge to you as a group leader to lead well. Think about it in this context. Group member, what do I need to do this year to point you to Jesus? What do I need to do to remove obstacles from you in your life right now that would hinder you from meeting with Jesus or growing in your relationship to Christ or growing in your understanding of the Word? And so I would love for you to think about these verses as well. So here's some things to summarize what it might look like for us to meet in homes, in person this year in the context of home group ministry. Well, as you've heard already, I want to challenge you to care well in this season for your group members. And two words to remember there is to show grace. This is a word that we've been talking about a lot as we've been navigating as a church, how to regather and opening ministries and programs and even just physical space within these buildings. But we want to encourage you strongly to care well for your group members. This maybe means listening more than normal. This means really trying to get at the heart of your group members to see how they're really doing, maybe to know their fear and anxiety, maybe to know the areas in their life right now that they are doing really well, particularly regarding their comfort level of regathering or how they would like to regather. But I just want to encourage you that I believe that God has given you an incredible opportunity, maybe the easiest win that you can have to care for your group this season is to show grace to them. And that is going to be a huge win for you as they feel like you have cared for them and heard them and listened to them, and you are trying to relaunch their group in a way that is mindful of them. And so I want to encourage you as group leaders, look for how you can lead well in this season. The second thing I wanted to talk about together as we look at relaunching in person is the idea that your opinion in this season as a leader is not going to be the most important one in your group. And so I want to encourage you, be humble. You may have an opinion on being in person or being online. You may not want to be an online group, or you may not want to be an in-person group. You may have opinions about wearing masks, or you may have opinions about the statistics of the virus this season. You may have opinions about how school is relaunching. I just want to encourage you as a leader in this season that your opinion is not the most important one. We want to be humble as leaders to say, tell me how you are doing. Tell me your thoughts. Tell me how I can care for you in this season. So I want to challenge you again, as I just said, listen well in order to lead your group members well this season, okay? The next thing I want to just encourage you with is this. ever-changing stages and bylaws in our world are becoming more normal. The things that we know today, or the stages that we're in, or the bylaws that we have as a church are going to be changing, and Lord willing, for the better. And so I want to encourage you as a leader to pass on to your group, let's be patient. Let's just be patient, and let's just go with the flow as we find out more, even as this fall we react to potentially what happens in the school systems or what doesn't happen. We're going to have very unique challenges as families, as parents, as home groups that meet in person, in homes. But there's three particular areas I just want to address, and there's going to be a little more clarification and information that will be coming as we get closer to ReLaunch Week on behalf of our church. But here's what we know so far. The church is a public place. Therefore, when you come to church on the weekends, you're expected to wear masks and keep your distance. Those are some of the bylaws we have within our municipalities. The home, however, is a private place. Therefore, as a church, some of you as leaders or groups, you've been asking questions like, what can we do? What can't we do? Can you give us clarity or statements on this? Perhaps the most helpful thing we can say to you as leaders is, we can give guidance as a church what happens within this place, but what takes place within the home setting is not something that we are going to dictate. We want to simply say this: we all know our current bylaws and rules as we are in stages within this municipality and within our communities, within our province and within our country. We want to live in a way that is above reproach, and we want to live in a way that is respectable to our neighbors and cares for those around us. And so our expectation is that you as leaders, as you talk with your groups about how to relaunch, to be aware of what your bylaws are and what is allowed and what is not allowed. So the difference between a public place at the church formally as an institution, but then how that's different from a private gathering, and how you are able to choose, for example, whether or not your group wears masks in a home is not something we're going to comment on, but you know what is allowed and what isn't allowed. The same thing is true for things like the physical distancing laws that we have right now. Our expectation as a church is that whether we're here or in public or even at homes, and there's the bubbles, our expectation is that we want to encourage you to practice physical distancing as your group plans to meet in whatever format it plans to meet. And then thirdly, what we know about masks right now is that masks are required in most public places, but the home is a private place. And again, we're not going to dictate how home groups operate in this way, but we just want to encourage you as leaders. If your group is deciding to meet in person, you may have group members this season who are going to be opinionated or passionate or have very warranted reasons why they want their groups to be in masks, even though it's a private space. As a leader in home groups, we want to encourage you, listen well, be patient, be humble, and also lead well and show grace, okay? So that's what we want to say about those things, and more information will come on that, and they're probably going to change over the next few months. Maybe they won't, but we want you to make sure that you know what is expected of you, not only as a citizen, but also someone that we care for as a leader within our church. And related to that care, the next point is that we are here to help you. If there are questions you have, if there are scenarios or dilemmas or certain conversations your group is having, I want you to know that as a church and as a pastoral team and as your home group mentors care for you, we want to encourage you, be open with us this season. Be open with us about ways that we can care for you or your group. Be open with us about how we can pour into you to encourage and love you as our leaders in home group ministry. But we want to encourage you to be open with us as we pray with you and as we support you in this season as home group leaders. I also want to say this. In this season, you've heard maybe on the weekends through some of our sermons and preachings, maybe you heard Pastor Robbie, but maybe more than ever before, I want to encourage you as a home group leader for your groups this season, fight for unity. And one of my former colleagues in ministry used to love to say about keeping what's important in the center. He would say, keep the main thing the main thing. And so as we think about perspective regarding home groups meeting in person, our opinions on certain things or how we think things should be done, at the end of the day are not important. We want to fight for things that unite us around the gospel. Think about what Paul says in Ephesians about how we're united around one faith, one Lord, one baptism, one resurrection, and we long for the Spirit to be in us as we live our lives for Christ. And so I want to encourage you as leaders, watch out for disunity, pray for unity, and help your groups be led this year to help them know here is what the important things. Here are the things that we are going to keep the main thing within our group. And there will be more ideas and opportunities regarding that in the future. So home group leaders, here's what we need from you right now this season. And many of you are well on your way regarding a number of these things. But as you can see here, we want to know from you, how is your group meeting? And as we've maybe shared some of the verses or the spectrum of how we navigate relaunching, here's just maybe a summary statement. Choose what's best for the whole group. Maybe consider not choosing what's most popular. Maybe consider ways that you can serve one another and love one another in this season by choosing something that you wouldn't prefer. But I want to encourage you, choose what's best for your whole group as you relaunch this season. The next thing we want to know is, what day is your group meeting? We have an idea of what day your group meets based on what day you normally had met, and likewise, what time is your group meeting? This will help us this fall, because as you will get your attendance email sent to you as home group leaders, this just helps us know as a church, here's when all of our groups are meeting, and if someone is looking to get involved into a home group, we know how to direct them towards groups that meet at certain times or in certain places. That's really helpful for us. Also, we'd love to know from you, is anyone in your group not returning? I know the deep, dark abyss of the summer is impossible to maybe get responses from some people in your groups because of vacation and all that kind of stuff. And then you throw in a worldwide pandemic, and everyone's in lockdown, and it's really hard to connect with one another. Well, we hope this fall, as you get ready to relaunch, you get an idea of all the group members that are coming back to your group. But if there is anyone not returning, we'd love to remove them from your group as a way of knowing maybe where there is space in this season to add a new person or a new couple with you as leaders. And so we want to know if there's any room in your group as you have identified group members not returning. And particularly if you're going to be an online group this season, you may have the ability to add an extra person or two without having to think through things like, well, how is our group going to fit in our home? Because you are online, and that would be a great way for us to get as many people connected into group ministry. Now, should down the road your group want to start meeting in person, we can navigate that when we get there. But if your group is online and you have some space, we'd love to know from you as well. We want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. You're probably exhausted from hearing my voice, and I'm just excited for you to be able to relaunch groups this fall. As you have mentors in your lives, they are excited for what God's going to do in your groups, and they're excited to be able to connect with you and support with you and be praying for you. And so I just want to encourage you to, as leaders, be responsive to your leaders. They love you so much. And so if they're reaching out to you or emailing you or texting you, I just want to encourage you, get back to them, let them know how you were doing, because they want to care for you. Just remember, our mentors don't often have groups themselves. You are their group. And so they want to reach out and care for you. And if there's anything that we can do for you or your group, reach out to your mentor, reach out to me, and be on the lookout for more information as we get ready to launch group life this fall. But thank you for serving in this way, and may God bless your groups this year as we find out together, in maybe ways that we can't see now, here is what God was doing in this season. Thank you, Lord. All right, God bless.